Welcome to another playoff edition of the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron and special guest, Zak Noble, the Four Seasons podcast. How we doing, fellas?
Awesome. Happy to be here. It's been a long time. I think I was last on in the fall for a preview series.
Yeah, only right. We start off with you, and we're going to have you on to wrap up the year and start the playoffs, right?
Hell yeah.
It's funny. I believe the last series you were on was the preview series, and we were talking about the Lakers in the playoffs, and we are not talking about the Lakers today because they didn't make the playoffs, and we could talk about them all day, but and as always, check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and YouTube. But let's dive right into it. First series, Golden State and the Clippers. What are your thoughts on this preview storylines of this series?
Yeah, honestly, I really like this Clippers team. They're strong. Especially from an offensive perspective, top 5 offense in the league this year. The only chance they have is if Steph Curry doesn't play in any games, but it looks like to be on schedule for game 1. I'll be shocked if he doesn't play. Storyline would be, can the Clippers play above average defense and maybe steal a game or two? I don't see it happening. They were, I don't even think they were about top 20 defense. I don't know if I'd give them that. Defensive rating, I think they're 17 here? Oh, 21st. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. So I'm going to say the Warriors sweep them pretty easily here. The Clippers did get one game early in the season. That's because the Warriors really didn't care at that point in time. Played them close one other time, and they got blown out the other two. So I'm not a believer that Clippers are going to get any, but I don't know if Pat Beverly can clamp down Steph for a game and everybody else runs cold. The only storyline I see here is if Kevin Durant's foot's out the door at all, and that's going to be the only storyline for the Warriors all playoffs, is how far out is Kevin Durant's foot or feet or whatever, fingers, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be the most interesting part. That's where teams struggle.
Yeah, I think for me, the storyline for the Warriors, do they get off to the right start to try and do the three-peat? Are there any chemistry issues if they struggle at any point in this series? Curry can see now, right? That's the biggest storyline. Curry can now see. So how does that affect his range and how deadly can he be? And then from the Clippers' perspective, does the Cinderella-like story continue? Granted, I do not think it's going to. This is the end of the road, I think. But obviously, I didn't have them necessarily being in the playoffs over the Lakers, and here they are. They traded away their best player, Tobias Harris, and here they still are. Lou Williams has been tremendous. Montrezl Harrell has been tremendous. So can they kind of just keep being that gritty nuisance in the West? But obviously, the Warriors are a tough team to face.
Yeah, you guys pretty much nailed it. It's a warm-up for the Warriors to get ready for their deep postseason run. And I think maybe from the Clippers' perspective, it's maybe a pitch to the free agent like, hey, we competed with the Warriors in the first round. Let's add a star, and we can kind of get over the hump, similar to what we talked about on the East podcast with the Nets. Now, some key matchups of the series in your eyes.
Honestly, the only guy that can play a lick of defense on the Clippers is Pat Beverly. And like I said, if he can maybe stop Steph in a game or two, and by stop, I'd say keep Steph under 25 on a horrible shooting night. And that's really the only storyline I see. Maybe they run the Warriors out of the gym for a game because the Warriors didn't come prepared. But I just don't see them not coming to that length, to that preparation. I just don't see it at all. So I'll go with Pat Beverly on Steph. I always like watching Pat be a nuisance.
Yeah, the key matchup for the Clippers' perspective is definitely Pat Beverly versus Stephen Curry. Can Beverly do anything to limit Curry? From the Warriors side, obviously, every single Warrior is a headache in its own to defensively scheme for. But I'm kind of looking at Cousins. Obviously, Cousins has been kind of looking back to be more in DeMarcus Cousins' form in years past. To end the year, was starting to move a little bit better on the court. So I'm kind of interested to see how he looks against Zubac, Montrezl Harrell. Does he continue to play at a dominant pace that he has to end the year? And does he set the tone for himself going forward in his first playoff experience?
And Zach pretty much touched on the key matchup here is, can the Clippers defend anybody on Golden State? I mean, if they want any type of chance in the series, it's going to be, can they pick up the defense, which they probably can't. Now, moving on from there, X factors in the series.
Whew. Maybe. I mean, lose their best player. I mean, Danilo has an argument for All NBA, honestly. So I mean, so he's got a run for best player too. There's a debate between those two. I mean, Lou's a top 5 closer in the game right now, but hey, maybe Lou goes for 40 points and can be an X factor and single-handedly win him a game. Like I said, I don't see him winning one, but I think that's the only chance they have to win, and I'd point him as the X factor.
Yeah, for me, the X factor would be Doc Rivers. Obviously, Coach of the Year candidate. Can he maybe outsmart Steve Kerr in some of these scenarios? Maybe they have a late, close game, and Doc Rivers can call an out-of-timeout play that helps get the Clippers a win. But realistically, it's very hard to plan for this Warriors team. And for the Warriors, there is no X factor. It's, can the Golden State Warriors show up and play like the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah, I think maybe the one thing you could look at from the Golden State perspective is chemistry. Are they gelling? Or Draymond and Katie arguing on the sideline? Are they all in sync? And, how are they doing with that? Other than that, I don't think there's really much concern. Not really the most exciting series to talk about. Prediction from you guys.
I do want to add, though, the Warriors, I mean, can get sloppy once in a while. I think they'll be polished come the playoffs. But from a follow perspective, the Clippers are number 1 in the league at getting to the line and number 1 in make. So there's that's really the only other edge I can think of that they'd have a chance here in a game. But then you were asking about season prediction. All right, series prediction. I'll go with Warriors in 4, and then the MVP of this series, I'll go KD.
Yeah, I'll go with Warriors in 4 as well, and I'm going to go with DeMarcus Cousins. I think Cousins has had good outings so far against the Clippers this year. I know he had his debut game, I think, against the Clippers, but I'm going to go with Cousins.
It would be a good series for Cousins to kind of get going and get his confidence back up in the playoffs. I agree with Zach, though. I'm going with 4, and I'm going with KD. Now, what would you guys place this series in terms of watchability ranking 1 through 10?
Yeah, that was a tough one to put my finger on. I mean, because I do like the Clippers. Like, I think they could keep it close if their offense is gelling and they're able to play the same way they do in the regular season. But the playoff season is so much different. I'm going to give it, just because I love watching. I mean, this Warriors team is probably going to be the last time we get to watch this team constructed as is. That's my prediction. I'll go with the 6.
Yeah, I actually went with a 6 as well. I think the Warriors, if they're firing all cylinders, is still a fun team to watch. The Clippers have been scrappy, which makes it somewhat interesting. These teams I don't think, like each other that much. If I'm recalling correctly, some of the season matchup.
Hey, do the Clippers like anybody?
That's a good point. That's a good point. They have that chip on their shoulder mentality.
Yeah, 666 for me as well. It just, I just feel like I haven't been super interested in any Warriors first round series in a while because we all know what the outcome's going to be. And like the Clippers have some exciting pieces, but not enough where it's like, oh God, they're going to really upset them or make this series interesting. But moving on from there, going to
666, the Illuminati series.
Yeah, the Illuminati series. That's what we got going on here. Nuggets versus Spurs. What are we thinking in this one in terms of storylines, preview?
Yeah, Nuggets versus Spurs. Nuggets, you think? I mean, are you buying they're coming in fully healthy?
It's tough. I mean, I guess I would say they're probably fully healthy. I mean, they've been resting guys, even though they said they weren't doing it for seeding purposes, but it seems like they might have been. I think, they do have – everybody has injuries at this point in the season, so they're probably a little banged up, but not any worse than anybody else.
I gotcha. I would say the biggest storyline, I mean, yeah, it's pretty obvious. But, I mean, from the Nuggets, it's their first playoff appearance in a very long time. A lot of young guys. Are they ready for the big stage? And then from the Spurs perspective, I believe it's been a little overrated, and that's DeMar DeRozan's playoff performances. He has plenty of really good performances, but he has way too many bad ones as well. So can he play the role he did throughout the regular season that helped them get to where they are? Can he carry them to win a game or two? Like from a scoring perspective, that's going to be the most telling thing for me. And will he need to? Is the last question there with DeMar DeRozan?
Yeah, for me, the storyline I'm looking at is the experience versus the inexperience. Obviously, Paul Millsap does have playoff experience, but a lot of these guys in the Denver Nuggets are really getting their first taste of playoff action, including Mike Malone, their head coach. Whereas the Spurs do have playoff experience. Obviously, Coach Popovich has been here many, many times. LaMarcus Aldridge has had some decent playoff runs. DeMar DeRozan has struggled in the playoffs, so how does he show up? But for me, it's a storyline of does that play a factor in this?
Yeah, you guys pretty much covered it. It's experience versus non-experience. And I think another interesting thing is how does Jokic's game carry over to the postseason?
Yeah. I mean, do you see anybody on Denver like going cold? I mean,
it'll be interesting because Pop is going to do everything he can to kind of prevent them from doing what they want to do and make Jokic uncomfortable. So it's like, who is going to step up on Denver? Obviously, they are talented, but are they going to kind of dwindle down in the limelight? Is it going to affect them in the playoffs, or are they going to be fine? I think it's also a lot of pressure on Mike Malone in the series, getting his team to perform at the level we saw in the regular season to perform that way in the postseason.
Right. Absolutely.
What would you guys say are some key matchups here?
For me, it probably – go ahead.
Go for it. You got it.
For me, it'd probably be Aldridge and Jokic. Obviously, LaMarcus Aldridge is kind of the driving force for this San Antonio Spurs team. I know when we did our All-NBA teams, I wanted to put him on third All-NBA because of the season he's had in San Antonio. So how can he limit Jokic? Can he kind of bully Jokic, who isn't the greatest defender? And how does Jokic match up with a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge? Can he dominate that matchup?
Yeah, I love the pace that this game's going to be at. I mean, two of the slower playing teams in the league. So I think it's a pretty good matchup overall. You took the player matchup I was going to go with originally. That was Aldridge and Jokic, but that's pretty glaring to all of us, I'd say. The other one I was going to bring up, I really hope he's on Jamal Murray, but you never know. They could play him off ball on Gary Harris, and that's Derek White, probably their best defender. What's he going to do and wreak havoc on Jamal Murray? And I think that's going to be a huge part of this series.
Yeah, I think the Spurs and a lot of their lesser-known guys who are having good seasons, how are they going to step up in the postseason, getting a really big opportunity, something to keep an eye on. I think obviously the benches, both teams have some quality players coming off the bench that can have a major impact in this game. Now, moving on to an X factor that is non-player, what would it be?
I'll let one of you take this first.
For me, I think the X factor for the Nuggets is going to be Mike Malone. When you have a very inexperienced bunch, when the lights are the brightest and maybe you get down early to the Spurs, you start struggling, can you get these guys to keep playing at a high level? Can you out-coach Coach Popovich, who is a genius at many times, who's going to be matched up and ready to try and limit Jokic, try and limit Jamal Murray? So for me and the Nuggets is how can Mike Malone navigate this tough coaching matchup? And then for the Spurs side of the ball, obviously, they're not a very good three-point shooting team. They're facing actually the best three-point defending defense in the league. The Nuggets held teams shooting just 33.9% on the season. So can the Spurs score enough to keep up with this generally high-scoring Nuggets offense?
Hey, but that's going against the number one three-point percent shooting team in the league, even though they attempt the least of them. That's probably why. I'm going to go with elevation. No, I'm just kidding. No way you can blame that in this series when there's no back-to-backs involved and any of that garbage. Yeah, the opposite, I mean, Mike Malone, that was a great point. But then on the opposite end, I mean, Greg Popovich, I mean, can he scheme the lesser talented team, I would say, from top to bottom, even though the two top guys, Aldridge and DeRozan, are two of the better guys in the series for sure, but with his depth and young players he relies on, Bryn Forbes, Derek White, Bertans, I mean, can he scheme these guys as well? It's going to be this is going to be a very tight series. I'm really excited for this one, honestly, just because the difference in play, and you got two great coaching candidates here. as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think there is a lot of intrigue to the series. I think a low-key factor maybe is Jokic's emotions. He's been known to get
There
angry.
we go.
Yeah, technical fouls, and we talked about it. Pop is going to probably scheme it so he's uncomfortable and disrupt his play. I think that could be a factor in the series because we know how good he can be, but we know he can be very easily upset. Now, prediction, what are we rolling with, guys?
All right, I'm going to go Nuggets in 6, even though I can definitely see this being a 7-game series. I honestly think the Spurs have a decent chance to win this. I'd probably give it 60-40 Nuggets in this series. But I'm going to go Nuggets in 6. Most valuable player should be Jokic.
So I alluded to this on Twitter today that I had an upset prediction, and it's in this. I think the Nuggets are a little bit flaky as a 2 seed. I've kind of felt this way for the last month. I'm going with San Antonio in 7. I think the Spurs experience is enough, and I'm going with MVP DeMar DeRozan. I think DeRozan is set to have a breakout postseason. I think he's set to try and prove people wrong. His usage rate is up in San Antonio. Now, the 3-point shot has completely disappeared once again from his game, but I just think there's something the Spurs team wants to prove, and I think this is where we see an upset.
Cool. I like it. Yeah, I like it a lot. Let me ask you this. What do you need out of DeMar DeRozan to prove? Because, I mean, he wasn't the type of scorer he was last year, and he didn't need to be. He played a much different role. He's more of a playmaker and facilitator, playing better defense as well. I mean, what do you need from him, I guess, from a stats perspective or even the eye test to show it was a good series?
I mean, for me, he averaged 21 points on the year, so I think he's got to be up around 24, 25. He's got to be the guy. The shooting numbers, I'm fine. If he shoots 48% once again from the field in the postseason, that's what you got to do. And I think he only got to the line 5.7 times this year. Normally, he's getting to the line 7 to 8 times. I would look to see DeRozan attacking the basket more and getting to the line just to kind of slow down the game.
Yeah, the free throw attempt was huge this year.
If DeMar is able to step up, obviously, that gives San Antonio a great opportunity to upset in the series. I'm going to go with Denver in 7, though. I'm going to go with a low-key MVP, Ken. I'm going to go with Paul Millsap.
I like that. That could happen.
It's a major playoff experience that he can provide for this team, and he's a two-way guy. Watchability for the series.
Yeah, for me, because it's so different than every other series, just based on the pace of play and that these are 2 just rock solid teams and they're not amazing at really anything. I'm gonna give it a 9 or a 10 for sure.
Yeah,
I'll buckle down on a 9.
Yeah, I'm actually going pretty high myself. I'm going to 8.5, mainly because I just think it's going to be a long, deep series with a lot of tight games, and I'm picking an upset, so I better give it a high watchability.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 8.5 as well. It's not the best series, but it should be really good and probably one of the top series. Now, moving on to Houston and Utah. What are some storylines of this one?
Yeah, I'm so happy that we got Houston, Utah, and then Portland, OKC, because I didn't want Houston and OKC playing each other, especially in the first round. So this one here, it's defense versus offense. Biggest storyline is can Houston continue to be consistent enough, and their field goal percentages and 3-point percentage, can they stay high enough to clean house and not let Utah stay in the series? Because although I think it's not going to be that close of a series in total games, I think the games are going to be pretty close, and I think Utah, if they can scheme their way, I think they could. I think there's definitely a possibility they could even win this series. I'm only going to give Utah, 20% chance at winning it because I think this Houston team's amazing. But biggest storyline, Houston defense. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah, for me, the storyline is, like you said, Zach, it's offense versus defense, right? You have a team that's entire premise is based around James Harden and the offense. The other team is based around, one offensive player in Donovan Mitchell, and then a defensive stud in Rudy Gobert and the team effort they have. I think that's the biggest.
Don't you talk ill on Joe Ingles, my man.
He's nasty, the Australian brother, and I know Jack Manuel would be pissed if I didn't mention Joe Ingles. He's a stud, and I'm looking too for this storyline. Can the Rockets come in with a chip on their shoulder mentality? Obviously, they were a game away from being in the NBA Finals last year, and everything fell apart with Chris Paul getting hurt. Can they muster up a dominant first-round performance against a really tough defensive unit to kind of start their playoff run? And then for the Jazz, too, how does Donovan Mitchell and company look to bounce back from a second-round exit last year? Obviously, they had the nice win over the Oklahoma City Thunder. Can they kind of create the same type of heroics and pull up an upset?
Yeah, obviously, again, great storylines from you guys. I think the impact Rudy Gobert has in the series is going to be huge. Last year, Houston did a great job of kind of limiting his impact in the series and kind of, I wouldn't say exposing him, but taking away from where he's comfortable. Then also Houston's health. Obviously, Chris Paul's what we're going to talk about if he's injured or somebody's injured. And then it's also like the role guys. We talked about Eric Gordon a lot this year. What type of player is he going to be in the playoffs? Is he going to be this fringe all-star type, or is he going to be this guy that shoots 4 or 12? This is what they need, the big performance from some of those role guys. But what are some key matchups in this series?
Real quick, do you think this Utah defense, I mean, they're top 3 defense in the league for sure, but would you guys pick them as the best defense throughout this regular season or going into the playoffs here?
Yeah, I would say they're probably in terms of consistency. And then, I think the fact is Rudy Gobert is actually a really imposing player in terms of creating fear in the other team offensively, where they're used to driving the paint and Gobert's in there. He might not block your shot, but he's definitely going to have an impact on it, where, a lot of teams don't have that type of player that has that impact over the whole course of a team in the whole course of a season.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the Bucks defense to me is obviously they were the number 1 ranked defensive rated team in the NBA. So I think it's probably between the Bucks and the Jazz. But I think when you look at the Jazz, you think defense first, whereas the Bucks, you don't necessarily think their defense is top notch. So I actually might give the edge to the Utah Jazz.
I think it'd probably be easier to break down the Bucks defense than it would be the Utah defense. But if one team break down Utah's defense, it probably would be Houston with all the switches and what they're going to do to you in the pick and roll situation and kind of force you out of your comfort zone.
Yep, love that, definitely.
But key matchups, obviously, a lot of it's going to have to do with defense.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, there's 2 that stick out, and that would be Clint Capella, Rudy Gobert. You just alluded to it there that they did a great job on Rudy Gobert last year, so can they do it again? The other one that sticks out, I don't know if it's going to happen. They'll probably have Donovan Mitchell on him, but I would love Joe Ingles on James Harden and just see what they can do. But I did see Pat Beverly giving Jay Crowder advice on how to guard Harden yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw that.
I did, yeah. It's like, damn, Pat, that's your former teammate. You're really just about to help him catch a L. Like, damn.
Right.
Yeah, no love lost, right? I think the Clint Capella, Rudy Gobert, that's one matchup I'm looking at in particular. Obviously, both those guys are pivotal to their team's success, both defensively and offensively. And then for me, a matchup I'm looking at, too, is Chris Paul versus Ricky Rubio. Chris Paul has had just a weird year for me. Obviously, he had the injury early. At times, his offense kind of seems like non-existent at times. Like his shooting percentages are slightly off. So how can Chris Paul take advantage of Ricky Rubio? And then vice versa, can Ricky Rubio be a consistent offensive threat for this Utah Jazz? Because they're a lot better when he is shooting efficiently.
For me, it's going to be simple. Both teams' number 1 scoring option. How's Utah going to defend James Harden? We've seen all types of weird looks thrown at him where guys are defending him, trailing him so he can't step back. And then how's Houston going to defend Donovan Mitchell? They don't have Trevor Ariza. They don't have a ton of defensive stoppers. Who's going to lock him down? Because it's not necessarily a great matchup for a guy like PJ Tucker.
Yeah.
X factor non-player.
Whew. Honestly, that Jazz crowd. I'm gonna give the Jazz crowd one. I like them. I think they're one of the best crowds. I mean, they've been getting a bad rap recently just because of the Westbrook thing. But hey, let's see how rowdy they can get. Just keep it under control.
My X factor for the Rockets is pretty simple. It's can they be efficient from 3 effectively? Can they continue to work within their offense? Obviously the Jazz defense is top notch. Can they not allow the Jazz defense to disrupt too much of what they do? To continue to hit the long ball. And then for the Jazz, the X factor for me is kind of hard because it's not. it's not like this team does one thing bad or one thing good, overly good. Obviously, the defense is top notch. So I guess the X factor. I don't want to take the crowd. That's like an easy cop out because you just took that. I guess the X factor would be taking care of the basketball. When you're not a very high scoring team, you don't want to give away possessions. So I'll say especially when you're facing a high power offense like the Rockets, I'll say the X factor for the Jazz is maintaining possession of the ball and not getting sloppy.
Yeah, I got rebounding, I think, is a factor in the series. Houston 28th in rebound percentage, Utah 9th in rebound percentage. So, and then we know Houston's going to go small a lot, and I think that's another X factor in the series. Who has to play against who? Who's going to get the mismatch? Who's going to adjust the other team's game? Is Utah going to have to go small? Is Houston going to have to go big? So I think that's going to obviously be a big factor in the series.
I mean, I'd love to see both these teams go small. Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker at the 5. Why not?
That'd be fun.
That would be fun.
All right. Prediction for the series.
Yeah, this one's tough because I definitely think there's a chance the Jazz could take them pretty deep, but I just don't think their offense is good or consistent enough. And the way Rudy Gobert was exposed at times, even though he was arguably had a top 10 regular season this year, he was that good. I'm going Rockets in 5, and then Harden being the MVP.
I'm going with the Rockets in 5 as well. I just think there's too much offense for the Jazz to overcome, and I think I'm expecting James Harden to have a really dominant series. I don't know why, but I'm expecting just the regular season 36.1 points per game or whatever carries over, and he just makes a statement. I think him and the Rockets getting the 4 seed knocked out him being the MVP, I think, for the year, at least in my eyes. So I think he's going to come off just a little bit more of a chip on his shoulder.
Man, so if they would have got the 3 seed by literally 1 game, or the 2 seed by 1 game.
If they got the 2 seed, it would look better, going from 14th in the West all the way to 2. 14th to 4th. That's just not as nice of a storyline for me.
I get the numbers. It's just the fact it's only 1 game separating them, and 1 point at the end of the year.
I got nothing.
I'm all for co-MVPs, but that's for a whole nother day.
Me too. Sign me.
Oh, I mean, me too. I mean, me and Nick both had co-MVPs on the award show, so just a little credit there.
Because I think both guys, and not to get to a different discussion, just played well enough that they deserve MVP. They just did it in different ways. Where Giannis was so dominant on both ends, his team was so dominant, where Harden literally had to carry his squad. I'm going a little vanilla in this series, and I'm going to go Houston in 6. I could see it being in 5, like you guys mentioned, but I think I'm giving Utah maybe a little extra credit. And I'm thinking since they played them last year, I think it's a little bit harder to handle them as quick as they did last season.
I didn't realize the Jazz were second behind the Rockets in made threes.
That I did not know.
No, I just learned this. That kind of blows my mind.
I think one positive for Utah as well is Donovan Mitchell's been better in the second half of the season compared to the first half of the season. That's always a plus.
Been way good, but I mean, it's literally just him, Gobert, and Ingles. I mean, I'm not trusting really anybody else unless Grayson Allen is game 82. Grayson Allen, he's not touching the floor.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some hope. And I mean, Kyle Korver coming in could give him some 3-point shooting, but we know Houston's going to really expose him. And same thing for me, though. Harden would be MVP in the series. Where'd you put watchability in this one?
Watchability is high in this one just because defense versus offense again. And I like watching the Jazz. I really do. I'll go with 9 again.
I mean, as a lot of people know when they listen to this show, I'm a defense first kind of guy, so I'm also intrigued on that side of this. I'm going with the 8.5 again. Defense versus offense. It just that's what's playing over and over in my mind. What style prevails?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 9 here. I just also like the factor that these teams don't like each other. And I definitely think there's going to be a couple scuffles in the series. And I think Utah and Houston are going to really get into it, and we'll see some really good games. Over to Portland and OKC. Go ahead.
Who's your first scuffle?
Jay Crowder and everybody? No. I can see Crowder and Tucker really getting into it. Like, both guys are tough, like hard-nosed guys, kind of known for being really physical and willing to kind of grind into you a bit. So that'd be probably a top choice.
How about Chris Paul and the mayor of Utah?
I could see that too. I could see Chris Paul and all the officials. But let's move over to OKC Portland. What are your thoughts on this one? This is a pretty interesting series.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, I wish CJ has been back for a couple more games. But I mean, I think he's well rested and he's ready to go. Nurkic being out is major. The other bigs haven't been that great. Defense is going to suffer without Nurkic, and it will continue to. You know, I was so torn on this one. I had a number written down and just kept going back and forth on it. Biggest headlines for me is how good Dame Lillard was. Terrible in the playoffs last year, absolutely terrible. Overall in his playoffs, he's been about half and half, good versus bad. But then again, his supporting cast hasn't been that great. So for me, it's Dame Lillard is the biggest one, and CJ, how good those two can be. I think they definitely can win the series. But again, I think it's the same situation as Utah, Houston, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the storyline for Portland is how do they bounce back from getting swept last year? How do they overcome the Nurkic injury? Can Lillard pretty much carry and will this team to the next round? Because obviously, CJ McCollum is coming back from an injury, so who knows if he's going to be 100% or is he going to be at like 80%? What factors that play into it? And then from the flip side for the Thunder, can they get out of the first round? Right, you just got done re-signing Paul George. You brought in Dennis Schroeder, and you got a Markieff Morris, and you're trying to make a deep playoff run. You've had one of the best defenses. For a lot of the year, you had a good defense. It kind of fell apart a little bit after the All-Star break. And how good can Paul George be? Because obviously after he suffered that shoulder injury after the All-Star break, he hasn't necessarily been as efficient. Yes, he had that game winner against Houston the other night, but I think he still shot 37% from the field that game. So it wasn't like he was killing it all night. So how does this Thunder team, bounce back after a rough last postseason?
Yeah, Paul George's health is going to be big in the series.
Yeah, I was about to ask, what percentage would you guys give his health? I'm thinking he's only about 85%.
See, I was thinking 80. I was thinking 80. I'm not even sure if it's 85. I mean, defensively, you don't lose much because it's not like his legs are banged up. It's just his shoulder. But I think between 80 and 85 seems about right.
Especially during the playoffs when the physicality picks up. And it was mentioned that both of his shoulders are bothering him, not just one.
Ooh, I didn't hear. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I know the one was hurting him substantially more, but the other one was actually acting up, and he was getting both stretched out on the sideline. So obviously his health is a major factor because he's been a major key for them. Then looking at the Portland side, obviously Nurkic is going to be huge. I also think it's a lot of pressure on Terry Stotts to make sure Dame can get going because it wasn't as much on Dame last year against New Orleans. It was the scheme they threw at him, and they just made him completely uncomfortable. It wasn't just Drew Holiday. It was the entire New Orleans defense that just took him out of his game.
You could even make it. Oh, sorry, not to cut you off. You could even make the case that one of these coaches could get fired depending on how this first round goes.
That was perfect. That was perfect timing. I was going to ask you guys. Chances somebody gets fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you've had, I mean, especially for the Portland Trailblazers, being a top, having home court 2 years in a row, if they were to not get out of the first round 2 years in a row, I know the injuries, you can kind of put an asterisk mark next to this year, depending on how you see Nurkic. But I think it falls down to Stotts if they can't get it done. And same thing with Billy Donovan. They were a top team for a lot of this year. They kind of fell apart after the All-Star break. And maybe if they don't get out of the first round, management decides they want to change a voice.
Yeah, I think the pressure's more on Billy Donovan because the expectations for Portland weren't quite as high going to the season. And, you're arguably your second best player because I think a lot of people would say Nurkic has probably been a better two-way player than CJ this year. So not having him kind of give Stotts almost a pass, whereas Billy Donovan, hey, we just got Paul George. You guys mentioned some of the additions they made in Schroeder and Morris, even though Morris hasn't really done anything with them. I think the expectations in OKC are just higher when you have arguably two top 10 players or two top 15 players.
Nick, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I think that I don't see any way Stotts gets fired unless they get swept again. I mean, as long as they're competitive in these games, even though it's a 3-6 matchup, Neil O'Shea is going to expect things. The fact that Nurkic is out, as long as they get one game and are pretty competitive, if Lillard plays just solid. I don't see any way Terry Stotts gets fired because he's loved there, and they just like the consistency there. That what's going on, obviously, because they didn't move CJ or anybody else really. But Billy Donovan, he's definitely his seat is flaming. If he loses this series, he's gone 100% in my opinion.
I agree. I could definitely see it. And I think the one thing for Stotts too is they also have a really young roster. So I almost feel like going to the season, they were like, hey, this isn't a big deal for us to kind of get to that next step. It's kind of almost more of a developmental year. Not that we weren't going to make the playoffs, but we're not expected to, win a championship or anything like that. But moving on from there, key matchups of the series.
All right. Key matchup will be, I think Steven Adams is honestly going to wreak havoc on whoever's got him. It's so glaring. It's just out there. Like, I hope he has like 3 20-plus points games, and I hope they just feed him. Other than that, I mean, there's a lot of them, but that's the one that's gonna be my favorite one. I hope he just eats.
Yeah, the matchup I'm looking at is Lillard versus Westbrook. Mainly because these two guys got a little bit chippy at each other during the regular season. They were jawing back and forth.
Westbrook took a shot at him a couple years ago when Dame was complaining about not making an All-Star team or something, and Westbrook said something along the lines of like, "It doesn't matter," or just play better or something like that.
Yeah.
And ever since then, they have not been friends.
Right. So I'm looking forward to that because obviously both of these guys kind of play with an edge. I keep mentioning a chip on the shoulder. It's been like my mantra for the day, I guess. But both of these guys like to play with a little bit more aggression. Westbrook has been more efficient as of late, which has been really fun to see. Obviously, the triple-double machine, the huge tribute to Nipsey with the 20-20-20. So I'm not expecting him to have a big performance because I don't think he wants to get bounced in the first round, obviously, again. And then vice versa. Lillard, he remembers last year. He remembers Drew Holiday giving him a headache. And obviously, Westbrook is not Drew Holiday in terms of defending. So I think this matchup in particular is going to be one that looks to whoever dominates between these 2 point guards, I think prevails.
Yeah, I really like this matchup. And this is like an argument you could make is like, hey, whoever wins this matchup might be the better point guard going forward. There's plenty of conversation in the offseason, like who's better, Dame or Westbrook? Who would you rather have? And I feel like Dame's really the type that'll step up his game when he's going up against another top tier point guard. So that's a really intriguing matchup. And also, like Zach mentioned, like Steven Adams is just going to eat. Like he's going against his former teammate and his Cantor. They're going to put Zach Collins out there. He's going to crush him. Myers Leonard, he's going to crush him. Like Adams is just really going to feast in the series. And then also even Nerlens Noel is a guy who's been solid for them. He's had his ups and downs with them, but he's another nice little X factor they can bring up the bench. Well, talking X factor, actually, what's a non-player X factor for the series?
Ooh, a non-player X factor. You guys lead this one here.
I mean, for me, when it comes to the Thunder, it's been the same thing all year. It's 3-point shooting. Can this team get enough offense outside of Westbrook and Paul George to match up with a tough defensive team in Portland? Can Jeremy Grant continue to hit the long ball? Can they find some contributions elsewhere? So for them, it's a 3-point shooting. And then for the Blazers, the X factor for me is, can they create turnovers? They only created 12.4 turnovers, which ranked 29th in the league this year. They weren't very good at creating turnovers. So can they create enough turnovers to kind of get OKC out of rhythm and push the tempo?
Yeah, pushing tempo is major here. I mean, there's a big differential in pace between OKC's speed and Portland slowing it down quite a bit. It'll be interesting whose game prevails. I mean, who caters to the other team, I guess. But can OKC get back their premier defense that was towards the beginning of the year? And I think honestly, a big part of that, I think Westbrook focused more on his offense and picked up towards the end of the season. And his defense was really good at the beginning of the year. That was one thing I noticed. Other than that, I mean, maybe injuries and just getting a little lazy as the year went. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think 3-point percentage, like you brought up, is huge for both teams because it has the ability to kind of open up the floor on both ends. If you look at OKC, getting Westbrook in the lane is obviously key, especially for him being more efficient. If you have Terrence Ferguson or Grant knocking down the threes, it's going to open up their offense. And the Portland side, it's the same thing. Is Mo Harkless, Aminu, Seth Curry coming off the bench? Are these guys going to knock down the three? So you can't send those double teams after Dame. So it's a lot of supporting cast in this one. Obviously, OKC has more stars, but I think the supporting cast for Portland has the ability to kind of help push them over to another level that can make the series more interesting. Now, moving on to predictions. What are you guys rolling with?
This is another tough one. I personally think OKC could sweep them. I also think Portland could win this one. But I'm going with OKC in 6. Just think they've been good enough, and the Blazers not having Nurkic is going to be absolutely major here. Their bench hasn't been consistent enough for me. So MVP-wise, that'll be a tough one. I'm going to hope Paul George is healthy enough. It could be between any of the 3 guys in OKC. But I'm gonna go with Paul George.
So I'm going with the Thunder in 6. I think they advanced this year. I just don't think Portland has enough. And for MVP, Raymond Felton. No, I'll go with Russell Westbrook for MVP. I just think I think he's playing at a different level right now, and I'm expecting to carry over to the playoffs. I think more than anyone, obviously Paul George is going to be crucial to any deep playoff success they want to have this year. But I think in the first round, especially just from Westbrook's the struggles last year, where Ricky Rubio kind of made him look like a fool a couple games. I just think he has a little bit more to prove.
I'm going to go with OKC in 6 as well. I'm going to go with the low-key MVP again. I'm going to go with Steven Adams, who I think is just going to eat them alive. Watchability,
Okay.
what do we got?
Yeah, Thunder's also number 1 in steals and number 1 in offensive rebounds, where Steven Adams is an amazing offensive rebounder. But watchability, this is another 9 for me. If Nurkic was here, I'd say it's a 10, but yeah. I'll go 9. Could very well be closer to a 7.
Yeah, it's 9 for me. Russell Westbrook and Paul George are probably 2 of my top 10 favorite players to watch in the NBA. And Lillard being another one of those guys. So having 3 of those guys in one series automatically makes this a really watchable series for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go 8.5 here. I think it would be a lot more exciting, like Zach mentioned, if Nurkic was there, because you really wouldn't know who's going to win the series. Where now it's just like OKC just has a little bit more talent, especially in that starting lineup, having that big 3, and not knowing enough about CJ and his health and what he's feeling like. It kind of makes you feel a little bit more scary about the Portland side. All right, guys, you want to just recap all your picks from all the series real quick?
Yeah, so I had the Warriors in 4. I had Houston in 5, OKC in 6, and then Denver in 6.
So I had the Warriors in 4, the Spurs in 7, the Rockets in, did I say 5 or 6?
Man, it's your pick, not ours.
I think I said 5, and I had Thunder in 6.
Just throw out 3 numbers now and then.
No, I definitely said Rockets in 5.
Yeah, you did. I said Rockets in 6. I was the only one. So I got Warriors in 4, Denver in 7, Rockets in 6, and then OKC in 6. Zach, I know you weren't able to hop on the Eastern Conference one. You want to give out your picks for the East?
Yeah, why not? Honestly, this East, I'm not looking for, I love it's the playoffs. I'm absolutely jacked up. A bunch of new teams are in the playoffs. That's the fun part. I just don't think these series are going to be that close, honestly.
Not what I like to hear. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, guys, because you both have 2 teams playing, and I want them to be good for you guys. So, first off, Milwaukee, Detroit. Blake Griffin's health really scares me, but I'm going with the Bucks, and I'm going to go 5. I'm gonna give the Blake factor a 1.
That's nice of you.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah, it's I might be a complete idiot for that. But Celtics Pacers. This one, Marcus Smart people are going to realize how freaking important this guy is. If they had Victor Oladipo, I think it'd be a wrap right now without Marcus Smart, which is crazy to think. But because of that, I'm going Celtics in 6. I feel crazy even giving the Pacers 2. But because I really think, especially if Smart can get back sooner than later in round 2, I still think they have a great chance to make the finals, which a lot of people think I'm crazy. They were my beginning of the season pick. Haven't really wavered from it. So Celtics in 6 there. I do think the Pacers actually have a fighter's chance. I'll give them a 15% chance in that one. Philly and Brooklyn. This one, because of Philly's inconsistencies and Embiid. What would you guys put Embiid's health at?
Yeah, that was like our major talking point. I mean, it feels like there's a 50% chance he could miss game 1, but I think the bigger factor is he 100% at any point during the series? That's what I think the major factor is, and it's really hard to gauge because Philly's been really weird about the whole situation. If he's not 100%, it really changes the dynamic of the series.
Absolutely. So I'm going Philly in 6 in this one. That seems very generous to me. I think it could easily be a sweep. But I'm going to go 6. I think they're going to scheme him. Russell's going to get hot at least one, and then LeVert. I like the way he's coming around. I really do. I think he's going to have at least one big game in the playoffs. So we'll stick with 6 there. And then Toronto's going to go with the sweep in the final game, even though I would really like Orlando to get a couple there.
Yeah, our picks are pretty close. I picked the sweep for Milwaukee. I had Celtics in 6, Sixers in 6, and I think Toronto in 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I had Milwaukee sweeping. I had the Raptors in 6. I'm just not all the way in on the Raptors. I had the Celtics in 7 over the Pacers, a little bit of hometown bias. And then I had the Sixers in 5 over the Nets. But again, the Joel Embiid injury wrinkle could change that prediction from a 5 to a 6. But I just still think there's enough star power on the Sixers to win that in 5.
The only thing I have a tough time with is really the Raptors in 6. How do you think that's going to happen?
I know Kawhi's going to turn it up to another level, but Kyle Lowry has constantly had playoff woes, and I don't know. I like the way Orlando's played to finish out the year. I think they got a little bit more what's that word I'm trying to find? Pizzazz to them. I don't know. They're playing a little more sparkle to their game.
I thought you were gonna say sass. I was like, damn.
And I like their pace. I like the way Vucevic I think matches up well with Marcus Gasol and Serge Ibaka. I don't know. I don't think the Magic win that series by any means, but I also like Terrence Ross off the bench. DJ Augustin had a career year. I just like some of the things Orlando has done. They are a very good defensive unit. So I just think they have a chance to at least steal 1, maybe even 2.
Yeah, we tried to talk him out of it on the last show, but he didn't want
to. Yeah, the Raptors have to prove me wrong. That's all. I understand they had a completely different roster than last year. Pascal Siakam's going to be most improved, but I don't know. I just until I see them dominate in the playoffs, I'm just not buying in.
Fair. I don't think they need Lowry, though. They didn't need him throughout the whole regular season, but I can handle that because I like the Magic, what they got going on. And Aaron Gordon's peaking at the right time. He's playing like a boss. Last question that I need to hear from you guys is, can any upset, is there any percentage of a chance? I know you guys are fans, so that's why I want to hear it, that any upset can happen in the East.
Kory, you go first.
Yeah, I think the biggest chance for an upset in the East comes from the Pacers Celtics series.
Yeah.
If Victor Oladipo, as you mentioned, was healthy, I think the Pacers, Marcus Smart healthy or not, have a really good chance still to upset the Celtics. Just how they matched up earlier in the year when he was healthy. Now I'd probably give the Pacers a 30% chance to upset the Celtics. I still don't think it happens. But no Marcus Smart, and I don't know. I like the way they've matched up. Obviously, the last game was a blowout by the Celtics, but then that game before, it came down to a Kyrie Irving bucket with 0.2 seconds remaining to beat the Pacers. The Pacers just can't beat themselves in that series.
Yeah, to like make Kory and I feel good about ourselves, I guess. I think the Celtics and the Sixers, when you look at both of them, the major issue could be something along the lines of chemistry or emotion, where something that isn't necessarily related to talent, because we both know the Celtics and the Sixers are more talented than teams are facing. But you could argue that they're both less of teams than their opponents, where they're more cohesive, they have more depth, they're gelling, and there's just more of a positivity around them. So I think those two series, that would be the way those teams would upset from a non-talent perspective. It would just be like, all right, we're frustrating them. They're starting to implode. People are complaining about their roles. Who's taking the last shot? All of a sudden, the series is in a game 7.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, I mean, that's my wish, but I'm not going to put too much hope into it. Like I've said on like the Brooklyn Buzz and on the last East show, the Nets are playing with house money. So regardless of the outcome, I know this is a cop out, but I'm going to be happy.
Prayers up for y'all for sure.
All right, that wraps it up. As always, guys, happy to have you on. Zach, give yourself a shout out on Twitter and your pod.
Guys, I appreciate it. Great conversation as always. But Zak Noble, really just on Twitter, ZAKNOBLE, and the pod, as always, is 4 seasons, 4 SGNS, and we are just entering that 4th season. Enjoy, people.
Perfect, Zach. Thanks for hopping on. And again, peace out, Knuckleheads.
And check the show out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and YouTube.